Melissa Hartman trusted two people more than anyone else in the world: her husband, Jacob, and her sister Rachel. But behind the walls of their quiet suburban home, the two people she loved most were hiding a secret that would shatter her life and lead to a spiral of betrayal, obsession, and psychological collapse no one saw coming. Melissa Hartman always believed her life was stable, even enviable. At 34, she had built a cozy life in the suburbs of Fort Collins, Colorado. He understood that family mattered to Melissa, and their basement was finished and fully furnished. She was polite, helped around the house, and even bonded with Jacob over small things like the latest streaming shows or which takeout place had the best tacos. Rachel began dressing differently around the house, more relaxed, sometimes in oversized t-shirts that weren't hers. Melissa noticed but dismissed it. Rachel had always had a casual style. He said he was tired from work, but he started spending more time in the basement fixing things that didn't seem broken. He stopped initiating affection with Melissa, and when she reached for him, he would gently pull away. She hadn't done it in years and thought it might rekindle something. But when she got to the back office, she was told he had taken the day off. Confused, she returned home. Not yet. She began to monitor things, quietly watching Jacob's movements more closely, checking his phone when he left it unattended, noting Rachel's strange schedule. She started writing everything down in a journal. She didn't want to jump to conclusions. She needed evidence, not feelings. Jacob's car was gone, and so was Rachel's. She waited for hours until they returned separately, minutes apart, claiming they had both run errands. Neither knew the other had been spotted missing at the same time. Melissa said nothing. She smiled, nodded, and later that night cried alone in the bathroom. These were red flags, but Melissa still held on to hope. Maybe it was stress. Her dreams of growing old with Jacob, of raising children together, of family holidays with laughter and warmth, all started to unravel. She felt betrayed, even though she didn't yet have proof. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. And no matter how hard she tried to maintain the facade, the truth was beginning to surface in the cracks they couldn't hide. Maybe the presence of another adult in the house disrupted their routine. Still, something about the way Jacob looked at Rachel during dinner, or how they'd both laugh at private jokes, began to bother her. Her sanctuary had turned into a stage for a play she hadn't agreed to star in. And though she couldn't yet name what was happening, Melissa could feel it rising, like a storm about to break. The calm, perfect life she had built was beginning to rot from the inside. And the worst part was, no one else seemed to notice. Melissa was glad to see her husband being supportive. She found comfort in watching them get along. It made the home feel full again, more alive than it had in years. It wouldn't be a burden, at least that's what they told themselves. He had a reputation for helping neighbors with small fixes around the house and never turning down a cold beer after work. And hear their voices from the basement, soft, low, and intimate in a way that made her skin crawl. She told herself not to overthink it. Her husband wouldn't do something like that. Her sister wouldn't betray her trust. She buried the discomfort deep, afraid of what it might mean if she confronted it. Tall, lean, and ruggedly handsome in a blue-collar way, Jacob looked every bit the committed husband. Melissa adored him, even if their marriage had grown a little routine over the years. There were days when she would barely come out of the basement. Then other times she would be around constantly, offering to cook dinner or suggest movie nights that Jacob always seemed enthusiastic about. Melissa found herself shrinking in her own home. She felt like a visitor, an outsider in the space she had once ruled with confidence. To her, stability was a blessing. After all, many of her friends were going through divorces or drifting apart from their spouses. She counted herself lucky. Her days were filled with the sweet aroma of baked goods, clicks of a camera for her home baking blog, and the calm routines of her marriage to Jacob Hartman. They were the kind of couple that neighbors smiled at from across the fence. People admired how put together they were. Their two-story home had a trimmed lawn, wind chimes on the porch, and flower beds bursting with color in every season. On the surface, everything seemed in perfect balance. Jacob, a 38-year-old vac technician, was known in the community for being dependable. Rachel Wilson, Melissa's younger sister by 5 years, had always been the more free-spirited one. While Melissa settled down early, Rachel moved through a string of jobs and relationships that never quite lasted. Recently, she had gone through a bitter divorce that left her emotionally fragile and financially strained. It wasn't a surprise when she called Melissa asking for help. She needed a place to stay for a while, just until she could get back on her feet. Melissa didn't hesitate. That's what sisters did for each other. Jacob, though less enthusiastic, agreed. When Rachel moved in, things were civil. But as weeks turned into months, small changes began to creep into their daily lives. There were late nights, too. Melissa would come downstairs to grab a glass of water. Jacob's behavior subtly shifted. He became quieter at home, often distracted. Rachel, too, became harder to read. She was either overly sweet or strangely distant. The tipping point came one weekend when Melissa decided to surprise Jacob at work with lunch. The trust that once defined her marriage began to crumble. Despite the growing suspicion, Melissa didn't confront either of them. But inside, her world had already shifted. The man she thought she knew, the sister she believed would never betray her, were acting like strangers. The boundaries between right and wrong didn't vanish all at once. They dissolved slowly, hidden beneath the routines of daily life. What started as innocent gestures between Jacob and Rachel gradually shifted into something far more dangerous. Rachel was watching TV in the living room when Jacob came in to grab a drink. They started talking about something trivial: old movies, childhood memories, until Jacob sat beside her on the couch. The spark had faded. Their life together had become a routine he didn't know how to escape. Rachel offered a taste of something new. She was a risk, a disruption, and he was too selfish to resist. Every time he crossed the line, he promised himself it would be the last. Jacob pretended everything was normal. He kissed Melissa goodnight and texted Rachel under the blankets. Rachel played the role of the grateful houseguest while counting down the days until she thought Jacob would finally tell Melissa the truth. Instead, she laid next to him in bed, heart racing. They used excuses: errands, late-night walks, picking up takeout. Melissa, meanwhile, began quietly collecting information. She checked Jacob's GPS history, found deleted messages through recovery software, and saw timestamps that confirmed her worst fears. There were photos, texts, hotel check-ins. And once she started looking, it was all there, right in front of her. She listened to his breathing and wondered how much of it had been a lie. The life they built, the vows they exchanged, the quiet moments on the porch at sunset, had it all meant nothing? Not yet. She wanted more. She wanted to know how far it had gone, how long it had been happening, and whether they had ever planned to come clean. She began plotting her next steps quietly. If they had turned her life into a game, she would play along for now. But she knew something they didn't. She had the truth. And soon, she would decide what to do with it. Her mind began looping every recent interaction between Jacob and Rachel, replaying them under this new, painful suspicion. Everything looked different now. Melissa, meanwhile, started researching signs of infidelity, searching forums for advice and journaling every small inconsistency she observed, but the excitement outweighed the guilt. The secrecy only added to the addiction. Her husband had been sleeping with her sister under the same roof. Every time she hugged Rachel or kissed Jacob, she had been blind to a lie unfolding in real time. But deep down, she felt something tightening around her chest every time Jacob smiled at Rachel a little too long. She began staying up late after they went to bed, watching how long it took Jacob to go downstairs for water and come back. The minutes stretched longer each time. She imagined a future where they could be together openly. When Jacob told her he couldn't do that yet, that it was complicated, she took it as a temporary delay. She clung to the idea that she was special, that what they had was real. She ignored the fact that she was destroying the person who had offered her kindness and shelter. Then, without a word, Rachel placed her hand on his thigh. Jacob didn't stop her. What followed was a kiss brief, electric, and reckless. It began with prolonged eye contact at the dinner table, shared jokes that excluded Melissa, and moments of lingering closeness when passing each other in the hallway. Melissa offered to ride along, wanting to spend time with him, but he firmly declined. He said it would be boring. That same afternoon, Rachel left the house with a gym bag. Hours later, Melissa drove by the neighborhood shopping center and saw Jacob's car parked in a corner of a motel parking lot. She froze. Her mind couldn't make sense of what she was seeing. She took a photo of the car and drove away, her hands shaking. Jacob found himself drawn to Rachel in a way that confused and thrilled him. She was unpredictable, playful, and emotionally raw in a way Melissa hadn't been in years. Rachel, still emotionally vulnerable from her failed marriage, didn't initially set out to cross a line, but Jacob's attention was intoxicating. He complimented her appearance in ways that felt genuine. He listened when she talked about her pain. He didn't rush her or judge her like her ex-husband had. That emotional safety gradually turned into chemistry. They avoided each other for a few days, guilt heavy in the air, but it only made the pull stronger. The next time Melissa left to visit her mother for the weekend, Jacob and Rachel spent most of those 2 days together. What began as an affair of impulse quickly evolved into a regular pattern. Late nights when Melissa went to bed early, grocery store errands that took longer than they should, shared rides under the excuse of saving gasol were opportunities they used. She began seeking him out, waiting in the kitchen when he returned from work, laughing too hard at his jokes, brushing against him in the narrow stairwell. Little by little, they became comfortable in a secret world Melissa didn't see. The first physical contact happened one night after Melissa had gone to bed early with a migraine. After that moment, there was no going back. Jacob told himself he still loved Melissa, but the truth was harder to admit. He had grown bored. Rachel began to believe that Jacob would leave Melissa. Melissa remained unaware of the affair, but her instincts kept whispering that something wasn't right. The lies between the three of them started growing roots. One Saturday afternoon, Jacob claimed he had an emergency HVAC call across town. She didn't confront him that night. Jacob, unaware that his secret was beginning to unravel, continued to meet Rachel in hidden places. The betrayal was deeper than she could have imagined. And yet, Melissa didn't confront them. Melissa felt like she was living in a carefully crafted illusion, one where everyone wore masks, smiled at the right moments, and played their roles so convincingly that the truth became buried under layers of polite lies. The screenshots of messages, the hotel receipts, the photo of Jacob's car in the motel parking lot, even a screenshot from her bank's location history, confirming Rachel's phone had been in the same place at the same time. She uploaded them to a secure cloud folder under a fake email address. She labeled everything meticulously, as if building a case for a trial. Her sister had laughed at her behind her back, and Jacob had encouraged it. That hurt in a way she hadn't prepared for. She became an observer in her own home, watching the two of them navigate their secret while thinking they were still in control. But she had something they didn't: clarity. And that gave her power. A brief kiss before they disappeared into the guest room. Melissa watched it all on her laptop in the early hours of the morning, numb but focused. It wasn't about confirming the affair anymore. It was about documenting it. She printed everything: messages, photos, timestamps, footage, and sealed them in a large envelope. She labeled it with Jacob's name and left it in his truck while he was asleep. She also left a copy in Rachel's handbag. No notes, no threats. Just the truth, dropped like a bomb, waiting to detonate. They had made her feel small, invisible, but now she was watching every move, silently gathering the tools to dismantle their illusion. Rachel avoided Melissa entirely, staying in the basement most of the day, but Melissa didn't ask questions. She went about her business like nothing had happened, waiting for one of them to crack. That night, Jacob didn't come home. Rachel didn't say where he was. The silence stretched into the next day. The loneliness she had felt for months now turned into something sharper: rage. But instead of exploding, Melissa internalized it. She made appointments, filed paperwork, and gathered everything she would need to separate her life from Jacob's with precision. Rachel was gone. Her things vanished from the basement, her car missing. He looked shattered, like a man who had finally realized the cost of his betrayal, but Melissa offered no sympathy. She slept in a locked bedroom, cooked her meals alone, and moved like a ghost through the home they had once shared. She wasn't crying anymore. She wasn't begging for explanations. Melissa didn't ask where she had gone. She didn't care. She had made sure the affair would implode on its own. All she had done was give it a little push. There were no arguments, no screaming matches, just cold, methodical steps forward. She claimed insomnia and started spending nights on the couch. She began leaving little signs of ownership, her perfume in the bathroom Melissa used. Her clothes tossed casually on the laundry chair, coffee mugs with lipstick stains on the kitchen counter. It was as if she was erasing Melissa bit by bit from her own home. Jacob seemed relieved more than concerned. He didn't even try to argue. That stung more than she cared to admit. Even when she was pulling away, he didn't notice or didn't care enough to ask why. She wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing her fall apart, because in her heart, that's exactly what she was doing. But once she knew what to look for, she began to see it everywhere. She told them it was for security reasons after hearing about a neighbor's break-in. Neither Jacob nor Rachel questioned her. They didn't suspect that Melissa already knew everything. They didn't realize she was preparing for something. The body language, the stolen glances, the way Jacob and Rachel were always just slightly too synchronized in their movements, it was all laid bare under the harsh light of suspicion. And now that Melissa had evidence in hand, her focus shifted from denial to strategy. She copied everything. Melissa began testing them without their knowledge. She would casually ask Jacob about his work schedule and wait to see if his answer matched the GPS data she now tracked. She would mention seeing Rachel around town and see how both of them reacted: nervous glances, awkward silences, forced laughter. It had been sitting in a drawer for over a year, forgotten. Out of curiosity, Melissa charged it and found that some of Jacob's earlier messages had been stored there. Scrolling through them was like stepping into someone else's reality. There were dozens of messages to Rachel from months ago, some flirty, others explicit, all confirming how far back the affair really went. Rachel had written things about Melissa mocking her routines, criticizing her appearance, even bragging about how clueless she seemed. The cracks in their stories widened every day. And the more Melissa watched, the more she saw not just the betrayal, but the cold carelessness with which it continued. They weren't sorry. They didn't stop. They just hid better. Her biggest discovery came from an unexpected place, an old iPad that had once been synced with Jacob's phone. The betrayal wasn't just physical, it was personal and cruel. She started withdrawing quietly. She cooked less. She stopped texting Jacob during the day. She didn't invite Rachel to chat like before. One night, she installed a motion-sensitive camera in the hallway outside the basement. The camera caught them days later. Jacob sneaking down the stairs after midnight, Rachel meeting him at the bottom. By now, Melissa had stopped sleeping in the same bed as Jacob. Rachel had also changed. She had grown bolder, more comfortable in the house, as if she already saw herself as its future mistress. Melissa's response was silent but calculated. The next morning was eerily quiet. Jacob left for work without a word. Melissa took the opportunity to change all the passwords to their joint accounts, moved half of their savings into a new private account, and contacted a divorce attorney. Jacob returned late the following night. He didn't look at Melissa. His eyes were hollow, his jaw clenched. In the days that followed, Jacob barely spoke, because she already knew everything. And soon the whole world would too. Melissa's silence was no longer the quiet of confusion. It had transformed into a weapon, cold, sharp, and deliberate. Every move she made was with a purpose now. The house felt like a battleground in the aftermath of an invisible war, the tension thick and suffocating. Jacob, once confident and charming, now moved like a shadow of his former self. He avoided eye contact, spoke only when necessary, and spent most of his time in the garage or sitting in his truck with the engine off. It was clear the truth had landed hard. The envelope Melissa had placed in his vehicle did what she intended. It broke the illusion he built around his double life. She changed the locks even though he still lived in the house until the final papers were processed. He was just sitting there, staring at the wall. She didn't speak. She walked past him quietly and locked her bedroom door. That night, she placed a chair against the knob. It was irrational, maybe, but something told her not to ignore the dread forming in her chest. She set up surveillance cameras inside and out, citing safety to the landlord. She didn't sleep easily anymore. Not because of heartbreak, but because she no longer trusted what Jacob might do when fully broken. Melissa didn't return. Instead, she worked remotely from the hotel, checking the surveillance footage on her phone daily. For 3 days, the footage showed Jacob coming and going at odd hours, standing in the backyard for long stretches of time, and staring at the back gate as if waiting for someone to return. Rachel never returned. Melissa had no idea where her sister went, and she didn't care to find out. The footage showed him leaving the house with a duffel bag and never returning. Her sister never resurfaced, at least not within Melissa's reach. But each morning she got out of bed, opened the curtains, and faced the sun. That, in itself, became an act of defiance. Because despite everything, she was still here, and that mattered. She had seen how deeply betrayal could wound and how quietly danger could slip in when disguised as intimacy. She wasn't broken, but she was different now. She assumed Rachel had gone to stay with someone, maybe another friend, or maybe even out of state. She could no longer bring herself to care. Not just recipes and tutorials, but journal entries, long essays about deception, about survival, about the masks people wear in plain sight. Her story wasn't just one of infidelity. It was a reminder of how quickly love could become a weapon, how silence could be louder than violence, and how sometimes the ones closest to you are the ones who inflict the deepest wounds. Melissa waited a full week before going back. When she did, the house was empty. Jacob's things had been cleared out, the keys were left on the kitchen counter, and a single photo remained on the living room wall, a family picture taken years ago, long before everything had fallen apart. Melissa took it down and threw it into the trash without hesitation. What mattered was that the toxic presence in her home was finally gone. They advised her to take precautions, even though there had been no direct threats. She didn't need to be told twice. That afternoon, she packed a suitcase and left the house, checking into a small hotel across town. She filed a restraining order the next day, citing emotional distress and unsafe behavior. Her attorney submitted the remaining divorce documents on her behalf. Melissa refused to go back until everything was finalized. Hours passed, and Melissa tried to distract herself with her blog, baking photos, and a growing pile of emails. But the unease didn't fade. Around noon, she received a call from the police. Melissa had timed everything perfectly. Her legal counsel was efficient, and she had documented every step of the affair in case Jacob tried to deny anything. A security guard had spotted him asleep in his truck with a bottle of whiskey in the passenger seat and a loaded handgun under the driver's seat. He hadn't threatened anyone, he hadn't made a scene, but the situation was serious enough for police intervention. He was detained for evaluation and taken to a hospital under temporary psychiatric hold. Just the smell of it on his breath when he passed her in the hallway, the bottles hidden deep in the trash. After everything that happened, after being exposed, humiliated, and left alone, his mind still circled back to the person who had helped shatter his life. She noticed him watching her sometimes when she was on the phone, watering the plants or sitting alone at the dining table. His gaze was no longer familiar. It felt heavy, bitter, resentful. He had lost everything, and somewhere in his mind he blamed her for it. But he didn't. He didn't contest the divorce, didn't fight for the house, didn't make excuses. He signed where he was told to, as if he knew he didn't deserve a single thing from the life he had helped destroy. But silence, though convenient, didn't stop the damage. Something darker was growing inside him. Melissa could feel it. The basement felt like a tomb now emptied of belongings, but haunted by betrayal. Melissa left the door shut and kept it that way. The air in the house remained heavy with unspoken things, but she had found an eerie kind of control. For the first time in months, she wasn't the one living in fear. Jacob was. The divorce process moved quickly once the paperwork was filed. He began drinking, not openly, not at first. Melissa became more cautious. One night, Melissa came home from the grocery store and found Jacob sitting in the living room in the dark. The TV was off. The lights were off. The next morning, Jacob was gone. His truck wasn't in the driveway. Jacob had been found parked outside Rachel's old apartment building. Melissa was stunned. Not because of where he was found, but because of what it suggested. He had gone looking for Rachel. He hadn't let her go. The police informed Melissa that Jacob would likely be released within 72 hours, pending assessment. Jacob's release came quietly. No one from the hospital contacted her directly, but she received a call from her neighbor who spotted his truck back in the driveway. On the fourth day, he was gone. His truck was missing. She changed her locks again, deleted every shared online account, and scrubbed the house clean of anything that tied her to him. But something inside Melissa had changed permanently. She no longer trusted as easily, no longer viewed love through the lens of warmth and safety. In the weeks that followed, she began to write again. Melissa no longer baked as often. She didn't decorate the front porch like she used to. The house felt colder now, not because of the weather, but because of the emptiness that lingered in every corner. Melissa stood in the middle of the living room, staring at the bare wall where family portraits had once hung. The kitchen, once her sanctuary, reminded her too much of whispered conversations behind her back. The basement felt haunted, not by ghosts, but by secrets. Every drawer, every surface still carried the echo of betrayal. The breeze was soft, the kind that carried the scent of distant rain. She sipped a cup of lukewarm tea, eyes tracing the streetlights turning on one by one. This used to be her favorite part of the day, when the world quieted and everything felt still. Now she found herself bracing for a phone call or a knock on the door, waiting for another unwanted surprise. She considered selling the house, moving somewhere new, but something told her that leaving would feel like defeat. She wasn't ready to abandon everything. Not yet. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was thick, reflective, full of memories she wanted to forget. The ordeal had ended, at least legally. The divorce was finalized. She would sell the house. Holding on to it didn't feel like strength anymore. It felt like clinging to ruins. The walls held too many memories, too many shadows. She didn't even look back when the truck pulled away from the driveway. She had shed all the tears already. What remained was resolve. She wasn't the same woman who had welcomed her sister into her home with open arms or trusted her husband without question. That version of Melissa had been shattered, but the woman who emerged from the wreckage was sharper, wiser, and infinitely stronger. It was time to start over somewhere no one knew her name, somewhere she could breathe without being reminded of the worst months of her life. No history, seasons changed. Some nights were still restless. Some memories still surfaced when she least expected. But healing, she had learned, wasn't about forgetting. It was about living in spite of remembering. One morning, Melissa woke up and realized something strange. She hadn't thought about Jacob or Rachel in days. Their presence had finally faded, like scars that no longer ached when touched. What remained wasn't bitterness, but a quiet acceptance that life could break you and still move forward. No lies, just clean walls and the promise of something new. She began to rebuild her life, one small routine at a time: morning walks, grocery shopping without panic, reading at night without checking the door locks every hour. She reopened her blog under a new name, shifting her focus from baking to storytelling. She wrote anonymously, sharing her experience not with names or dates, but with raw honesty. The audience grew quickly. People resonated with the truth behind the betrayal. The community she built online became a space where she could be vulnerable without fear. Jacob had vanished from her life with no further incidents. None of the listing details mentioned the heartbreak that had soaked into the floorboards. As she packed boxes, Melissa was surprised by how little she wanted to take with her. Most of the furniture stayed behind. The wedding album went in the trash. She didn't know what the future held. Love might come again. Trust might return in pieces. But for now, she was okay being alone, not lonely, just free. Clothes, dishes, holiday decorations, all donated or thrown away. She kept only what felt like hers and hers alone. A few favorite books, a camera, some photos of her parents, her grandmother's necklace. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No greeting, no signature. Just one sentence. Rachel was still missing from the picture, her number disconnected, her social media accounts deactivated. It was as if both had evaporated, leaving Melissa with the ashes of what used to be her life. There was no longer any fear left in her for either of them. She placed the letter in a drawer without a word and locked it. Whether it was Rachel or someone pretending to be her, it didn't matter anymore. The truth had already burned through every corner of her old life. There was nothing left to destroy. In the weeks after returning home, Melissa tried to reestablish some form of routine, but everything felt foreign. Instead, she focused on reclaiming her space. She painted over the walls, rearranged furniture, removed every trace of Jacob and Rachel. She even tore out the flower beds in the front yard that she and Jacob once planted together and replaced them with new soil, new plants, things that had no memory of deceit attached to them. It was a slow process, and some days were harder than others. Some days she couldn't leave her bed. Other days she found herself scrubbing floors at midnight, desperate to cleanse more than just dirt. She didn't speak to many people about what had happened. Her parents had been devastated when she finally told them the truth, especially about Rachel. Her mother cried for days, blaming herself for not seeing the cracks between the sisters earlier. Her father offered to come and stay, but Melissa declined. She needed to do this on her own. Friends offered comfort, but even their well-meaning words began to feel hollow. No one really understood the layered kind of pain she was carrying. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was betrayal wrapped in betrayal, the kind that made you question your own judgment, your own reality. Late one evening, Melissa sat outside on the porch, staring at the fading sky. But nothing came. The world outside kept turning, even though hers had stopped for a long time. Then came the letter. It arrived without a return address, written in handwriting she didn't immediately recognize. He said he'd leave you for me, but he never did. Melissa read it twice before folding it back into the envelope. Her hands didn't shake. Her heart didn't race. The next day, Melissa met with her attorney again. Not about Jacob, not about protection orders. She had made a decision. The house went on the market quickly. Her realtor promised it would sell fast, quiet neighborhood, good schools, well-maintained property. When moving day came, Melissa didn't cry. Her new apartment was modest, just 2 bedrooms, a small balcony, and a kitchen that needed work, but it was hers. Months passed. She wasn't healed entirely. Melissa stood once again on a porch, this time in her new space, watching the city lights flicker beneath a sky full of stars. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough.